Sup legends, and welcome back to another ladder salmon video. At this point, I'm sure most of you know what ladder is, but in case you are just completely residing under a rock, Ladder is hosted at the wonderful website UMLeague.net. It is a monthly, semi-competitive, semi-casual format with a limited and rotating roster of heroes and maps that leads itself to creating interesting and new, fresh metas every month. The point of these salmon videos, which stands for Seasonal Analysis of Ladder Meta and Other Novelties, because I love weird acronyms, is to just take a deep dive into each month's roster and try to figure out what the meta is going to be for that month. Normally, these videos are posted on Monday as a part of my Meta Monday series, and I guess there's a little bit of like a roller coaster story as to why this video is being posted today. So September 1st was last Thursday, and I was actually going to post this video then, except I went to a Harry Styles concert that day, ran out of time to record, and said, screw it, I'll just do it on Monday and it'll actually fit the Meta Monday theme. Well, then Monday came around, I recorded, was not happy with it, and said, it's not that important that it gets done on Monday. I'm just going to do it on Tuesday. So here we are. It's a little bit late. It is already 6 days into the month, but I will assure you, I made all the predictions for Season 7 on the last day of August. So I'm not factoring in any of the actual already transpired events into my predictions, as you will very obviously see because my predictions are already wrong. Let's start, however, by taking a rewind and look at Season 6 and what happened in that. So on the left, you can see my preseason tier list, and on the right, you can see my postseason tier list. And what a drastic change. Basically, I was right in that Dracula and InGen would be the best two heroes this season. I was wrong about the order. Now, I've theorized that, well, in my opinion, the Drac InGen matchup is roughly even, but Dracula is slightly favored. I theorized that people through matches to boost InGen's win rate and make me wrong about that. But of course, that is a grand conspiracy theory that has little to no ground and is just something to justify why I feel frustrated that I can never predict anything right. But yeah, both of these heroes absolutely dominated this season. We'll take a look at their win rates and you'll see just they were leagues above the rest. And then every other hero was kind of in the same pit of squalor that I will call the dumpster tiers. They just got consolidated into two tiers because while their win rates ranged from 50% to 35%, that's just not cutting it compared to Drac and InGen. And they were all kind of equally mediocre, which is why it was really hard for me to differentiate these two tiers. So basically within the tiers, I think they could be ordered. You could move Sinbad up one or down one, and it wouldn't really change too much, I think, in my opinion. It was mostly kind of a crapshoot just because a lot of these heroes were in very similar positions this season. And I think I'll be able to explain it a little bit more when we see the win rates. But just as a reminder, my tier lists, or at least the way I do it, are not solely based on win rate because I think there's a lot more to the story than just how many games a hero wins. A lot of it depends on how many plays they have and who they're playing and winning. That matters a lot. So yeah, there's the dumpster tier, and the dumpster tier which is on fire because those heroes were a lot worse than the normal dumpster. There's two layers of trash this season. Although trash isn't really the right word because, again, King Arthur had a 35% win rate this season. And Sattler had a 50% win rate. So everyone's in between there, which isn't actually that bad. It's just aggressively mediocre compared to the top two heroes this season. Let's take a look at the matchups this season. And I'm really only going to focus on the matchups between Dracula and InGen, although there are some interesting things going on elsewhere. As you can see by this big column of red down the middle, Dracula and InGen were very, very hard to beat this season. Uh, they they dominated. Very, very, very clearly. There are three matchups in particular I'd like to point out. First of all, being the aforementioned InGen Drac matchup, the actual matchup between the two bosses of this season. And I said it was roughly even, slightly Drac favored, but InGen won 70% of their games this season. They actually met 10 times, which means InGen won 7 out of 10 of those matches, which is a slightly small sample size, but it just means that Drac was like 2 games away from it actually being even. So I think given more plays, maybe people would figure out that matchup more from the Drac side. I don't even really remember the maps from this season, but it was Hero both Paddocks, HG, and Sunnydale, which those maps actually aren't that bad for Muldoon. So maybe, depending on what maps those matchups were played on, I could see InGen maybe having a little bit of a boost there. But so yeah, I'm still Team Drac on that side, but maybe you know something about that I don't. The other matchup I'd like to point out is Dr. Sattler versus InGen. This looks really good for Ellie, as she was able to beat Robert 50% of the time, but the one caveat I will say there is that they only matched up twice, so they just split games, so it's not that good as it seems for Sattler. And the other one is Jekyll and Hyde, who actually had a 38% win rate against Dracula, which is like really good compared to what some of the other people were putting up. And I know Floam, at least, was like grinding Jekyll and Hyde this season. And we played 3 times, and we played Jekyll and Hyde versus Dracula 3 times in a row, and he came so close to beating me in like 2 of those games, but I was able to pull it off with Drac, and I think that's just mostly due to the consistency issues between Jekyll and Dracula. I think Dracula is like a slightly inconsistent hero that has ways to make himself more consistent, and Jekyll and Hyde is like just very inconsistent, although they're almost equally powerful. I think given the consistency, Drac has just like a little bit more of a boost, and like his big his big attack that you chuck cards into beast form, I think is just like more reliably good as a finisher compared to Jekyll and Hyde's Forever Hyde, just because Hyde has to throw specific cards into that one, and it starts off at like 1 less base value, a 5 versus a 6, so if it gets fainted, it's only dealing 3 damage versus 4 damage, although when Jekyll actually pulls off like a big Forever Hyde that he chucks like 4 cards into, that's like 13 damage, which is a lot easier for him to get up to those big numbers than it is for Dracula. So I don't think that's the worst matchup for Jekyll and Hyde. I just think that probably like a Drac player that knows what they're doing probably wins that matchup more often than not. So those were the only matchups I really wanted to talk about, just because they were kind of the only ones that mattered. But I'll be referring to some other matchup win rate data as I explain the next slide, which is just my analysis of why I ranked heroes the way they were. So looking at the win rate versus plays graph, which I finally figured out how to put labels on so you can kind of tell what hero is which a lot more easily. You can see that InGen and Dracula are just way above the rest in terms of win rate. Basically having like a 60 plus win rate is insane, and Dracula basically had a 69 nice percent win rate, and InGen had like an 81% win rate. So yeah, just crazy. And I'm also pretty confident that InGen's win rate of 80.77% is like the highest win rate anyone has ever had in Ladder, which actually Luke Cage might contest this season. But so yeah, InGen was good this season, like good, and Dracula was like good and a half, I guess, which I wish it was the other way around, but I really liked playing as both of them this season. And now you can see everyone else, the other 8 heroes, are all kind of in that like 15% bracket between Sattler at like 51% and who had the lowest win rate? Actually, Jekyll and Hyde had the lowest win rate at about 37. So yeah, about 15%. And as you can see, they all kind of had different levels of play, but there's basically like two layers between them. There's Sattler, Sinbad, Mary, and Daredevil in that like middle layer, and then at the bottom there's King Arthur, and then that clump of Little Red, Jekyll, and Bruce Lee. And that's kind of what I based my two dumpster tiers on. Now, I did not put Sattler at the number 3 hero just because she did not get a lot of plays. She really doesn't get a lot of plays in ladder. I think that's because, well, this is just like my personal opinion on like the journey she's had. The first season she was in with the T-Rex, she is like a pretty reliable T-Rex. I don't want to say counter, but maybe T-Rex beater. I think that season, when people were still figuring out how to play both of these characters, she beat T-Rex like 80% of the time. And I was thinking, wow, this Sattler character is like really good. She's going to be like a consistent like top tier threat if she can consistently beat T-Rex. And then the next season came out and she was, for lack of a better word, dog shit. And I think she was in another season after that and was also poo poo. Maybe that was this season, I can't remember. But she just like doesn't really get a lot of plays. She had like 7 more plays than King Arthur and 10 less plays than like the Little Red, Jekyll, Bruce Lee clump. So I don't know if her win rate is entirely accurate just because she wasn't getting too many plays. And I think other people were just slightly more relevant comparatively. So the reason why Bloody Mary is actually 3rd is because she had positive win rates into Daredevil, Jekyll, King Arthur, and Little Red. That was all 55% and above matchups for her. And she was even with Sinbad, which is weird when you think about that matchup, but that's what happened this season. She lost to Bruce Lee a fifth of the time, which is kind of expected. I think Bruce is pretty favored in that matchup, and could not beat Sattler, although some of the sample sizes on that like aren't too realistic. Like she only played Sattler twice. Um, she was getting like a decent amount of plays though. She was the 3rd most played hero. So I think overall a lot of those matchup statistics are like pretty accurate. And she also was the best hero into both Dracula and InGen. She only beat them both about a third of the time, if that, but that is like actually excellent compared to what some other heroes were putting up against those two heroes. So yeah, I think Bloody Mary, looking at the data just a little bit more, wasn't actually too bad this season. I think given more time, um, probably could have made a run, but like I don't necessarily think it's the time aspect of the seasons. I think it's just the slight dip in like engagement, which hopefully gets turned around soon now that the Summer of Legends tournament is wrapping up, at least the pool play part is. I put Sinbad next just because he uh, actually had a slightly higher win rate than Bloody Mary. He was at like about 47%. The problem with Sinbad this season was that he like is horrible into both Dracula and InGen. I think Drac just hard counters Sinbad. It's like an 80-20 matchup, I think. And InGen just has the strengths to mitigate Sinbad's entirely. And so Sinbad probably just like never actually reaches InGen to throw big voyages into. So, yeah, I think both Drac and InGen are favored in their matchups against Sinbad. Although Sinbad was pretty good this season into Daredevil, Sattler, Jekyll and Hyde, and Little Red. Of course, that Little Red matchup is like amazing for Sinbad. And I've actually played the Sinbad Sattler matchup before, and it's crazy that Sinbad, a character with no passes and a ton of card draw, can actually exhaust Sattler. So, yeah, I think that just goes to show like how weird of a spot Sattler is in, and I think the next couple sets are going to have characters that she can do well into if she's going to be relevant like at all in the competitive scene. Daredevil, the most played hero by far this season, you can see in the win rate versus plays chart, he is all the way on the right, about 30 games above the next closest person. But again, his win rate, it was only the sixth highest, around 42.5%. So I think all the fears of Daredevil being like the next Sherlock or just being able to infinitely recur, those fears like are real against certain characters, but like he can't even beat Yananga reliably, a character without feints. So I think people have finally figured out how to play against him. You kind of just pressure, 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 and he doesn't have any card draw. And if you line up your feints right, well, then he actually exhausts very quickly. The one matchup I guess I want to highlight that went a completely different direction than I thought was the Daredevil InGen matchup. I played that twice this season against Feeble Blobber, and I was the InGen side. And on paper, it seems like Daredevil has all the tools to beat InGen. He can just through adversity all Muldoon's workers, and now suddenly Muldoon is a lot more exposed. He can pretty reliably attack him, and InGen only has like a certain amount of blocks. So in theory, like it seems really good for Daredevil and actually like exhausting InGen, but on paper, InGen's traps actually do a lot of damage to Daredevil. The fact that they stop movement makes it so that even when Muldoon doesn't have workers, he still is roughly safe from Daredevil, especially depending on what map you're on, how big the loops are. Daredevil can only move 6 spaces with a boost of 3, which he only has 4 copies of cards that have a boost value of 3, and 2 of them are Devil, which he really doesn't want to boost with. So if he boosts with the 2 that stacks the double blind boost, he only has 2 copies of those, and then everything else he's moving 5 spaces. And InGen also has like decent attack power with second shots that can be 5s. They should all be destroyed, which can be like 6 or 7. Fainted, it's 2 damage, and shoot hers, which are 5s. So he actually has like a lot of damage that can go over the top of Daredevil's block cards, because if Daredevil is not blind boosting, he can only block for 3. And so with the trap damage and the just chip damage over the top of Daredevil's values, InGen can actually pressure Daredevil a lot. And if he doesn't get healing or recursion, Daredevil is going to fall over like a sack of potatoes as soon as he meets any pressure, because InGen, with all his card draw, can reliably attack at least once a turn. And like this season, Raptor Paddock was a map, so when I played this matchup, we were on Raptor Paddock, and I would just like rending Daredevil into the pit, trap the exit and the entrance, put a worker there, and then suddenly Muldoon was able to attack Daredevil like 3 or 4 turns in a row. And it's just, maybe not 4 turns, but like he was able to attack him 3 or 4 times in like a 2 or 3 turn span. And if Daredevil gets unlucky and draws ketchup and mustard, it's over for him. So yeah, basically the whole point of that tangent was to say that Daredevil is a lot more mid than people think, and I am glad, because I really don't like playing as him or against him. So yeah, and then the dumpster tier was the next kind of slew of heroes. King Arthur just wasn't played that much. His win rate wasn't actually the worst, but I think if we just extrapolate the amount of plays to get it to like around average for this group, he would most likely be the worst. And Bruce Lee, Jekyll, and Little Red were all in this weird spot where they all had like basically the same amount of plays and basically the same win rate, but out of those 3, you expect Little Red to be the best. Take Zero Skater 12 on his most recent tier list, post Winter of Champions. Little Red was like his 4th best hero in like the top row with Yananga, Sherlock, and Medusa. Now, granted, that tier list was before the Marvel and Jurassic Park sets came out this year, and it was for the Conquest format, but I think people expect Little Red to be like at least an A tier hero, and the fact that she performed as well as Jekyll and Hyde and Bruce Lee means just something was wrong for her this season. And so because of those expectations, I put her as the worst of those three because she should be the best, and she wasn't. Little Red really struggles against Dracula and InGen. I think if she had advantage, both map and position, against InGen, it'd be a lot better for her, but I think in that matchup, InGen can just like attack her enough that it really pressures her with her symbols, and in just ladder in general, without map and position, she can't reliably do the thing, and I think that actually bumps her down a tier or two, maybe like a tier and a half in ladder. Maybe that's something I'll do. Maybe I'll make like a ladder tier list, like for everyone. That might be a cool idea. Let me know what you think. So yeah, and then between Bruce and Jekyll, Bruce had a slightly better win rate, just about like 3%. But I think he was just slightly more relevant. Looking at the win rates, it's kind of like a jumbled mess because they both kind of sucked against everyone. But I think it's just because of like consistency. Bruce is a lot more consistent than Jekyll, despite the fact that Bruce actually has like single copy cards. It's just Bruce's card draw and the fact that he can use every card in his deck. It's not split between two personalities, is why I put Bruce Lee above Jekyll. But like I said before, you could realistically like tweak every hero like one or two steps within their respective tiers, maybe move the ends up or down, and it would be roughly the same. But yeah, if your name wasn't Dracula or Robert, you were not really doing too well this season. So now let's talk about season 7. Now, this roster looks very jank. Perhaps it's reminiscent of the April Fool's Day ladder, but let's explain why. So Angel was finally the people's champion this month. Yay! The memers won out. And so at Ladder Council this month, let me also say that Zero Skater and I were the only ones that showed up. I guess Mike was like, he called in from like a plane. He's always on a plane. He's always flying around. My man likes to travel. But anyway, it was just me and Zero. So there were very limited opinions and viewpoints. So if you want someone to blame, you can blame us, the big YouTubers that ruined everyone's fun. But we basically decided there's two options we can go for. One, we can create a normal ladder season, and Angel's probably just going to stink. And then all the people that voted for him might be a little upset because he's just completely irrelevant, like normal, I guess. Or we could design a season so that Angel would fit in, and that way he isn't completely inviolable. And we opted for that route. So in order to have Angel have a fighting chance, we put in the other Buffy set members because they all kind of stink. We put in some other low tier scrubs like I Am, Jekyll, and King Arthur. We put in Robin Hood because, like, I don't know, in theory, Angel's 5s and auto damage like can just kill Robin Hood, so might not be the worst matchup in the world. And we put in 2 Marvel characters, Bullseye, because he's also kind of been like stinking in ladder recently, and Angel has like a couple big attacks and auto damage to deal with Bullseye's like relatively low HP total, kind of similar to Robin Hood. And we put in Luke Cage because, in theory, Angel has 6 auto damage from Killer of the Dead, 2 from Brooding, 2 from the Rogue Slayer, so that's 10. And then with his 5 5s, that's at least 5 damage. So that is 15 damage right there that Angel has on Luke. So he has a mathed out victory. He just needs to play every card and keep Faith alive, and then he should kill Luke. Now, Luke also hasn't been in a ladder season in a while, but when he first came out with the other Redemption Row heroes, he was really good. So this is a little bit of like spoiler knowledge, but like Luke is killing it this season, so maybe that wasn't the best choice. But we thought, hey, like there's also some other like not Luke counters necessarily, but like Jekyll is also like decent into Luke. Maybe they can do something. Like Buffy's got some auto damage, Spike's got some auto damage and some big attacks that if uncanceled could maybe go through. Same with Willow and Terra. Kind of weird. And like King Arthur's got some big attacks. So like people have some tools versus Luke. Of course, I don't test any of the like low tier scum when I'm like preparing for tournaments. So who knows if our thought process was justified. But yeah, that's kind of just like a breakdown of why this season looks like it does. It was kind of meant for Angel to not be completely horrible. And I don't know, based on some past ladders, like we had the Sherlock Scumbag ladder. I think that was season 5. And then season 6 last season, because Bloody Mary was the people's champion, the power level was like slightly lower, and I think people responded positively to that. Like Floam said at the beginning of the season, he was really excited for this season. It was like the exact opposite, or this season being last season, season 6, because it was the exact opposite of season 5. So this month, I'm actually going to put out a poll when we do the People's Champion poll. There's going to be 2 polls in one. And we're going to get some feedback on like what people think about ladder, what changes they might want, what like needs tweaking, just overall thoughts. So start preparing your opinions because we would love to hear them to make this experience as wonderful as possible. Because this is actually my favorite format to play Unmatched in. I absolutely love making these salmon videos, as you can imagine, and I love actually just like playing ladder games. I think it's amazing, and we want to make it the best we can. So yeah, that's the roster for this season. Let's take a look at the maps. We have Soho and Baskerville from Cobble and Fog. We have the Bronze from the Buffy set. We have Raptor Paddock from Jurassic Park 1. And we have Sherwood from Robin Hood versus Bigfoot. So do the maps matter this season? Yes, they do. Soho is actually Robin Hood's best map because of that central white spot. He can basically maneuver 2 spaces and be able to attack every zone on the map. And then with his ability, he can just hop back to that space. So he can basically wall up there behind some outlaws, and then on his turn, he'll be able to attack you no matter where you go, which is a little crazy. Robin is also decent on Baskerville, where he can literally cover every single secret passage, maneuver through, attack, and then like hop back through, which is just crazy. And Sherwood in general is just good for ranged characters. So in addition to Robin, we have like Merlin, Misty, Bullseye, although he doesn't really care about zones, both Willow and Terra. So that'll be interesting for Sherwood. Invisible Man probably likes Soho and the Bronze, and I guess also Sherwood. That map is like deceptively big, as like big maps where he can spread out his fog. Jekyll and Hyde really likes Raptor Paddock because of that tri-zone tower space. He can basically pure evil to hit anywhere on the map if it's a solo hero, unless they have a sidekick and they can block the other tri-zone spot. King Arthur will also probably be good on Raptor Paddock because of Command the Storms into the Pit. Spike, I'm not even going to pretend to know what maps he'd be good on. And Willow, well, I guess the Baskerville Library, the top right corner with the only one connection secret passage, Willow really likes that because she can body block and protect Terra or make Terra the meat shield. And I guess anyone with important sidekicks can probably make use of that library too, like I guess Spike and Drusilla. Luke can protect Misty. Arthur can protect Merlin. Angel can protect Faith. So yeah, the Baskerville Library, probably a juicy spot this season. So yeah, those are just my quick thoughts on which characters will be good on what map. Let's take a look at the tier list. So yeah, I think by far Luke will be the best hero this season just because he is, like on paper, the best. He will probably be the driving force of the meta or just get auto-banned every single game. But that's not to say he doesn't have a few counters at least. Before I get into the rest of the tier list, let's all take a break and hydrate, homies, because water is important. I don't know if you can hear it because I'm not sure if my mic picks it up, but it is like raining outside. It's been raining here for like literally the last day and a half, which is actually really good. I live in Connecticut. We're in like a pretty bad drought right now. So it's also like my favorite weather. I love hearing rain on like the roof or like a car roof. It's very peaceful to me. Obviously, like there are moments where it's like too much rain and like thunder is scary, but like this is like a nice calm, like a step above a drizzle. So uh, I'm like I'm in my Zen element right now, and I hope you are too, listening to my sweet, sweet voice. I think Jekyll and Hyde will be the second best hero this season, just because he is pretty good into Luke with his 8 to 12 auto damage and big attacks to hit over Luke's blocks. Although trash talking a Forever Hide feels bad for you. He's also like maybe not the worst into other characters. I think he's too consistent for mainstream competitive play, but his power level, like he can do some crazy things into maybe some of the weaker characters. So yeah, I think Jekyll will be pretty strong this season, along with Bullseye. I think Bullseye is probably a tad overvalued because he has like blue chunks in every single. He's blown chunks, I should say. Get my tenses right. He's blown chunks in basically every ladder season he's been in because just his health total just isn't quite high enough and his blocks aren't quite good enough. But he has, kind of like Jekyll, the explosive X factor of like better cards than some of these low tier heroes, especially the Buffy set. So I think Bullseye is either going to be really good this season or he's just going to be like his usual pitiful, mediocre self. But nothing in between. But I'm being optimistic. Another hero I'm being optimistic about is the Invisible Man, who on paper isn't the worst into Luke Cage because of all his auto damage and big attacks. Like he should be able to math out a victory versus Luke. The problem is Luke is pretty hard to play, and I know Ladder is like a slightly more casual format, so people who haven't mastered IM are probably going to be trying him out, which I think is a great idea. I think Ladder is the time to experiment because it isn't like a super competitive format or anything. I just think like IM is super hard to play. I know whenever I play him, I'm like, holy cow, this character has like so many micro decisions. I just don't know what to do. So I know that not everyone will be able to play him as well as Zero Skater 12. So he'll probably end up at like the bottom of this middle questionable tier. But I'm also being optimistic because like he shouldn't be horrible against like Bullseye or Robin Hood or some of the Buffy set characters anyway. So yeah, I'm optimistic about IM. King Arthur, he's pretty bad, but like he's probably better than the Buffy set. And Buffy, again, she's also like not great, but she's better than the rest of her set. When it comes to Giles versus Xander, well, at least the way I see Buffy, I see her as like a niche counter pick to like Robin Hood and the Raptors. I don't think she's good enough against Wukong, and whenever I'm playing those matchups, I really like having Xander because I love the card Military Knowledge. And Giles is great because he has 3 copies of Insight, which is basically eliminate the impossible from Sherlock's deck. Just the problem is Xander comes with 2 block cards, so he can block with 8 cards total. Giles does not come with any versatile cards or block cards, so he can only block with the 3 skirmishes and feints, and I guess regroups, but I don't really count those when I'm talking about it. So he can only block with 6, technically 9 cards. And oftentimes, I just think he dies before you see your 3rd or even 2nd insight sometimes. And training is just like a mostly unusable card, except maybe not in this season particularly. And so, like, whenever I'm playing Buffy, I guess it's different because I'm coming at this with the experience of, like, Conquest counterpicking. I'm using her for Xander. And my just general thoughts on Giles is, like, if you're playing Buffy Giles, just, like, play a different character who's just better. But, the Buffy mains probably know what they're talking about a little bit more than I do. I just think the overall problem Buffy has, and this is like kind of representative of her set, is just like her cards are just like a little mediocre and she doesn't really do that much. Buffy just has like a bunch of 4s, a couple points of auto damage, and just a ridiculous amount of card draw. And in like the real competitive formats, you need a little bit more than that. And it's why I don't think she's a Wukong counter, even though her kit might look like it. It's just because Wukong's cards are just much, much better than hers. Robinhood has been, as I said, super cheeks lately, but he's probably better than the Buffy set. Probably. He's actually probably better than most of these heroes, like Arthur, I Am, and Jekyll. It's just my faith in the Robin players of Ladder has gone down recently, and this is the season to kind of get his numbers back up. And if he can't this season, then he's going to be like perma dumpster tier from now on. Willow and Spike are horrible, and I'm not really going to explain that too much, but I put Angel last as motivation. So last season, remember I talked about how Floam played Jekyll and Hyde a bunch? That was because I ranked Jekyll like second to last. And Floam was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm going to prove you wrong, baked goods. So I'm doing that with Angel. I know at least like a couple people voted for Angel to be the people's champion. So they're going to see this. They're going to say, baked goods, challenge accepted. I'm going to get Angel to the top tiers this season. So this is your challenge, memers. Prove me wrong. I know I will actually be playing a couple Angel games this season. I did vote for him, so yeah, we'll see what we can do with that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Ladder Season 6, the recap, and the Salmon for Ladder Season 7. Let me know what you think. Who is going to be the actual worst hero? Are the Buffy set characters going to be relevant? Is Robin Hood going to make a comeback? And will Jekyll actually be able to maintain relevance? Who knows? There are so many questions this season, and I kind of like doing these like lower tier ladder tier lists just because they're a lot more tricky than just like the top tier lists where everything is like a little bit more figured out and there aren't as many questions. So this was an interesting exercise, and I look forward to once again being wrong. Now, I kind of have like a couple updates regarding like my channel and stuff to go over, but I think I'm going to make a separate video about that. So stay tuned for that later this week, and hopefully I'll make a couple more videos this month than I have been making in previous months. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. And as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!